Oh, I've lost everything. Okay. I will get there, I promise.
That's okay.
Brilliant. Okay. Welcome to another episode of the P&D podcast. It's been a while since we've actually recorded one of these, and we thought it might be great timing because as an organisation, we're going through a lot of change. So Anna and I wanted to have a chat about how we can explore the dynamics of change and the effects that it has, the different experiences. So happy to say I'm joined by Anna, my partner in P&D crime, to delve into the topic that's really crucial for anyone looking to thrive in this ever-changing world of change readiness.
Definitely. Hi, everybody. So it's great to be here. Change is certainly inevitable, but being ready for it can make all the difference. So today we'll be chatting through how to develop a change readiness mindset, the pivotal role of leadership, the importance of support systems, and the impact of self-directed learning, as well as the psychological factors that influence our ability to adapt.
Fantastic. Change readiness, it's not just about how we react to change, it's about proactively preparing for it. So we will be exploring what it means to have a change readiness mindset and how you can cultivate one. And that really does involve being open to new experiences and staying flexible, continuously seeking out those growth opportunities. So it sits very well with what we're all about in performance and development.
Yeah, absolutely. Leadership certainly plays a significant role in fostering a culture of change readiness. Effective leaders inspire and guide their teams through those transitions and providing the vision and support needed to navigate change successfully.
Absolutely. And outside of leadership, I know that's vital, but it's also important to think about other support systems, whether that's, your colleagues, mentors, or friends, because having a strong network can provide you the encouragement and some resources that you need to embrace that change.
Definitely. Self-directed learning, of course, is another, key component there. So by taking charge of your own learning journey, you can stay ahead of the curve and be better prepared for whatever comes your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll also touch on, I think you mentioned this, Anna, the psychological factors that influence our mindset around all of this. Because if you can understand your own mindset and emotional response to change, that can help you to manage stress and become more resilient.
Absolutely. I love talking about the
Yeah.
psychological impact. So lots of insights and practical tips here in this episode. So let's dive in and explore how you can become more change ready.
Fantastic. So we know there is a lot of change going on. What people may be experiencing right now in terms of change? What do you think are some of the particular things that have changed in our world?
Well, certainly off the bat, when it comes to current state, we've got somewhat a volatile, maybe uncertain market climate right now. I've got economic climate, I guess, too. Some of that, poses impacts on all industries, all businesses, general market shift, and, across the board, definitely affects individual businesses
Mm.
in those lines too. But businesses across the board again stay afloat by balancing those waves when it comes to market shifts. That's always been an ongoing thing. But I would say for us, for Impellam, right now we're definitely going through what would be considered somewhat a cultural shift, technological shifts, and with that coming with, more mandated expectations, evolving, growing teams, and kind of tightening the ship a little bit. But it's all for good use and with our people's best interest at the forefront.
Yeah, definitely. So if if we think about the technological advancements, which have had a really positive impact on the way that we work or we could work and how we can adapt to change. And of course, there are benefits, but there's also risks that we should be learning about. What do you think, from a balance perspective, what do you think the benefits are, and what are some of the things that we should be mindful of?
I guess so. Just kind of taking a second to look back. So, what has kind of been a major tech shift over the last year has been AI. And
Mm.
so a lot of that has posed some benefits. I would say for me personally, it's kind of only helped. And we've continuously shown those benefits across. Um, but I think at first, when it was sort of, you know, evolving and coming up, people were definitely a little freaked out or nervous about the rapid growth of technology and artificial intelligence, how that can impact the general market and, of course, the workforce. Um, but thinking about the types of risks at that time, again, people might have been fearful of it taking over, jobs or taking away human creativity or just that human element to things, which I, again, personally haven't experienced that with using AI or any other sort of like technological
Mm.
advancements in our workplace. Thinking about the risks now that we've been, it's been over a year now that we've, had Copilot and these tools. Maybe the risk is just it's simply not working or the risk of not knowing enough. And so with that, it's, you have the ability to, change that sort of risk mindset or that fear of not knowing what it can do or being too powerful or what have you, like those sort of assumptions. So the more that you can utilize the tool, learn about it, hear how other people use it, and things like
Mm.
that will help to kind of mitigate those fear of risks or any other sort of threats that you
Yeah,
might perceive.
just fear of the unknown, I think.
Yeah.
And that's, I really love that about our How to Hustle today with Ryan Zolek talking about the way that he's using Copilot, and that got people sharing how they use it, what value they're getting out of it. And as Kim Robbins was saying, it really is just about practice.
Right.
And as you've just said, utilize it, get to know it, see what works. Don't worry about breaking things, and share when you do find something that works, share that with others. And I think what we've talked about before that connects to this would be, the remote working practices that, of course, came about very much so during the dreaded COVID.
Yeah.
So people having to switch and change, working from home pretty much the whole time. Um, do you recall, what that was like for you, and what impact it had on your like daily routine and how you adapted?
Yeah, definitely. I think COVID is one of the biggest like examples that we can look back and reflect on in terms of like a big, big shift in how we live our everyday lives, not just work, but our lives as a whole. So, um, for me at the time, it was like, yeah, immediately work from home. I was pretty pumped about it when getting the
Yeah.
chance to work remotely, not gonna lie. And I was recruiting at the time, with Lorian. And I know, again, it's it all depends on, people's preferences and what they're used to. And so even for people that are really good at, adapting to change, I think at the time with COVID, like it still was, challenging to like get used to the COVID life and working remotely and whatnot. So I felt that, of course, I missed, the social like office setting, but for whatever reason, I ended up being able to kind of focus a little bit better and be more comfortable in my own independent space. I guess I'm kind of more of like an independent worker in that sense. But um, looking back, I remember that it was really important that we had leadership kind of behind us to support us and checking in, and we'd have, company meetings every week, and knowing, that we're all in this together, and like having that support definitely eased some fears or made that switch kind of more feasible to work with.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the thing too, like we all went through that in one way or another, and having to adjust to the COVID life, or, a lot of people lost their jobs or got furloughed, like massive shifts there. So thinking back, like that's even, that's a wider change, heavier change, I would say, of course. So like we got through that, and look how we turned out now. And so, and
Yeah.
like, look where we are now. And so it worked. And at the time, we were probably more fearful than ever. And I think, yeah, just being able to kind of look back and reflect and understand the experiences and hardship that you have gone through, and, came out successfully still and standing and resilient, is going to help for, other challenges that come in the
Yeah.
future.
I totally agree. And I remember when the lockdown first happened, I didn't respond very well. I was very panicked and anxious, thinking, well, because no one had any answers. Nobody could say, oh, it'll be for 2 months, 3 months, a
Right.
couple of weeks. For all we knew, it could be indefinite, and that was really scary.
Right.
But it's this great kind of case study, really. We don't want everyone to go back thinking about COVID, of course, but we've adjusted. But it is really motivational to think, yeah, we've all been through it, and for those of us that were lucky to survive it, with our health, and we learn a lot. I mean, I
Yeah.
learn a lot more about the value of teachers, because I was trying to
Yeah.
take on that role and work at the same time in my home with the kids, and that was really challenging. Got to spend more time with my children, and it slowed down a pace of life, which at the time I think I benefited from.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, everybody should take credit where it's due for how they handled that and come out the
Yeah.
other side of it. Um, so, and oh, by the way, Microsoft Teams, that was the first time I ever used it during that.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
company, we had it, but we were like, what's this? We're just used to Outlook. Why have we got this other thing? But then we were
Yeah.
using it for the video
That's so
capability.
true. Yeah, we had Skype, and then we had Zoom for a little bit. I had never heard of Zoom or used it, or
Yeah,
Teams. And then, yeah, I can't imagine like ever using Skype again after that or anything.
it's
But
terrible.
yeah.
Anyway, this podcast isn't sponsored by Skype, as you can probably tell. Um, but yeah, that's really good examples to look back at. And we've talked a bit about just through that, like how to navigate change. But what are some other tips, do you think, for developing that positive mindset, um, to help people really embrace that change or deal with some of the challenges and keep their resilience?
Yeah, I think kind of first and foremost, when it comes to people and when we perceive change, or we're experiencing change, we're predicting our responses or the collective response based on, data points that have
Hmm.
led us up to that very moment, or cognitive data points in that sense. So our brains naturally, when there is a change or a big shift coming our way, like might perceive it at first as a threat. And that's, again, naturally our egos are, protecting us in that way.
Yeah.
Um, but again, like perceiving change and what we are going to assume is going to happen as an outcome, whether it's good or bad, again, is only based on limited data, or those
Hmm.
data points or experiences that have led us up to that point. So it's like, we don't know what these other opportunities or things will be until that moment appears, of that moment of change. So we're cognitive forecasters in that sense, because we're working with limited data on ourselves. But maybe we're not the best cognitive forecasters because, again, we're making assumptions based on already lived experiences. And we don't know what we don't know until we know. And so sometimes those moments help us appreciate the full range of reactions and emotions that we can experience in the light of change. I think, again, with the COVID example, like that's a great shout out there because it's, you've experienced this before, maybe in a harsher way, and then you've gotten through it so you can do it again. But nevertheless, thinking positively about change and taking ownership or, taking control in that sense, because a lot, fear of change stems from a sense of lack of control or lack of trust or lack of communication or what have you. So kind of just being mindful, reminding yourself that you do have more ability to take on and adapt to change than your brain or sorry, your ego will might tell you otherwise. And
Yeah,
so
because it's trying to
sometimes,
protect you.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
trying to protect you and that, it's a nice thing that it's trying to protect you, but sometimes it's just, kind of simplistic thinking where, you're recognizing your ego's protecting you, but you can just say to yourself or out loud, thank you, ego, but I'm going to trust this
Yeah.
process and kind of, we'll see what happens because what's really the worst that is going to happen. Again, like the risks of a technological advancement. What is like, yeah, again, just kind of taking a second to really be practical about it and be realistic. And then you kind of realize like, okay, maybe I'm thinking in all or nothings, like I need to kind of dial it back down. So again, it's, being mindful of kind of how your brain and ego is responding to those things. And then also helps to, having that open mindset or positive mindset so that we don't fall into, and here's another psychological term, identity foreclosure, which
Ooh.
may prevent us from having an exploratory mind. So again, it's, thinking about every interaction, every bit of information, every, experience, like from the moment that we wake up and through the end of the day to, 24 hours of the day, like everything that we're absorbing is shaping how we're perceiving what's around us and our beliefs. But it's, again, tying it back to you're not limited to that information. You're not limited to what your job title says or what, we all have our core traits and what, strengths that make us who we are, but we're always changing and evolving. And the more that we learn and have a curious mind and open mind in that sense, not be too self-limited, it's, the more that we can embrace change and be, more forthcoming with unknown opportunities as an outcome. And so whether those, outcomes are good or bad, again, if they're like, what's the worst that could happen? Something not working for you. Okay, then let's look at that and then we can make it work. Like it's not an all or nothing sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir, of course, but I struggle with anxiety and historically have been very hesitant of change, and I've learned that kind of those sort of mental tools and to be mindful and like take a second to put my ego in check helps me kind of feel more at ease to take it on further. So
Gosh, lots of great tips in
yeah.
there. And I always appreciate your psychological terms and how well you explain them. So just to sort of summarize, I think from what you were saying, avoiding assumptions based on limited data, thinking through what you can control and what's outside of your control, what you can influence and what you can't.
Yeah.
Um, what's the worst that could happen? Having that kind of I suppose challenging yourself to ask your ego yourself those questions. And I personally love, so just to give a non-work related example, if I'm on a plane and I can be quite a nervous flyer, and there's what's it called, turbulence, I get quite scared. So I always
Me
look
too.
at the flight attendants to
Hmm.
see if they look scared.
Right.
And most of the time, in fact, all of the time, they seem
Yeah.
fine. They might go and take their seat and say, listen, we're going to have to sit down. But never have I looked and thought, oh my gosh, I need to worry because these people who know and do this all the time are feeling concerned. And I've done that lately with the changes, with our acquisition, and everything's been communicated so well from our senior leadership team.
Yeah.
I think the information has been cascaded so well that it's meant that we've got those data points.
Right.
We're not in the room with, our new global CEO. We're not necessarily at those tables, around those tables, but we're given so much information afterwards, and it's all been so positive that that's kind of eased any worry.
Right.
Having an exploratory mind. I really like that term. And then later on, you kind of used a term that we use more regularly at Impellam, which is be curious. So
Absolutely.
sometimes I say be nosy, but see what you can find out, who you can meet, um,
Yeah.
and your perceptions, and we've all got different set of perceptions that influence our beliefs. So just being mindful of which ones might be limiting you. So
Right.
really great advice across the board. Um, so, of course, you and I are great examples of being multi-generational. One of the things I love about Impellam is how diverse we are in many
Yeah.
ways, but particularly, we've got people from baby boomers right to the most recent, which is what, Generation Z.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, So how do you think, and we're both very mindful of putting people in buckets and, square pegging people in round holes, but do you think that people of different generations may perceive and adapt to change in different ways?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Again, not to generalize or, not to be ageist. We can look at, so yeah, starting with Gen Zs, the most recent kind of generation that's feeding into the workforce, typically have, you know, more typically more open to change in the sense that they have fewer like stagnant habits.
Mm,
They're more willing to engage in change to be successful. They don't like to be stagnant. They don't like to be there. Yeah, so they're more fluid in that sense when it comes to just like opportunities and change, for that. And because they are on the younger side of generations, they might be, they're more willing to be that malleable sponge. Like they like to be the malleable sponge. So yeah, they're going to be more open to things like that.
yeah.
And then for millennials, um, might be more willing to adapt to change if it benefits their personal and professional growth. So
Mm.
they are kind of more mindful and dependent, their reactions to change might be more dependent on their own individual morals, beliefs, values, and how that aligns. But not to say that they're still not, or not to say that they're not open to change in the sense, but
Mm.
yeah. And then for Gen X, so Gen X is interesting. They, along with Gen Z, and millennials might be more accepting of change given that their entire, childhood into young adult life was shaped around pretty rapid shifts in societal norms, family
Yeah.
dynamics, technological climate, all things like that. So they're more seen as the most independent sort of generation. I think the term latchkey kids is
That's
referred
me.
to the
Yeah.
Gen Xers, because at that time, moms were starting to go to work as well. So kids were kind of more becoming more independent, having to, look after themselves after school, things like that. So in any sense, Gen X might be, the most independent or used to that resilience of having to do it on their own, which is definitely a strong trait, but could lead to hyper independency sometimes. So they might be the generation that's least likely to like ask for help or, you know, ask for other options. But again, not to
Yeah.
generalize. And then
That's
lastly,
no, that's really
oh,
true. It
sorry.
makes me think of something that Lucy talks about in the leadership development program, which is, you're winning. Oh, what does she call it? But essentially, it's kind of getting somewhat of a fixed mindset, because what's worked for you
Right.
will always work for you. Like, this is
Right.
how, so for example, for females, like, well, when I was at school, like, if you worked hard and you got good grades and you had neat handwriting, that means success, that means approval.
Yeah.
And then later in life, when you hit the workforce, perhaps taking less risks,
Hmm.
not bringing in that diversity of thought so much, because what's worked for you should continue to work for you. That
Yeah.
can lead to, things like imposter syndrome and a confidence gap, and, it can stunt your growth.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that's just, I think it's a winning strategies, she calls it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I definitely like to ask for help, and that is
Yeah.
advice that I would give anybody. I mean, if I'm in the street and I'm lost, straight for directions, straight for, who might be the expert around here, kind of thing. And I think
Yeah.
that's good advice.
Definitely. I think it's like for the Gen Xers are truly like demonstrate how our brains like work in survival mode, which not to
Yeah.
like make it seem like you all had to be in survival mode on an island together, but like you see something and then you do it and then it works for, yeah. So you use this pen because it helps your hand. Okay, so I'm going to keep using, and then it's
Yeah.
just, and then they don't think twice about it and then they just keep doing
Yeah.
adapting. But then last but not least, we've got our boomers who are the oldest generations, having more, are going to be probably the most skeptical when it comes to change or, big shifts in their lives with anything. But because they've you know, lived through more experiences, and maybe some of those experiences you know, ended up being a failure or having, might have experienced more failed sort of situations. And
Yeah.
so because of that, they might be least willing to accommodate to change if there's little education or unreasonable strategy or funding towards, say, a massive tech shift or any sort of shift in their day-to-days. But they might be the more most sorry, they might be the generation that would question the most behind, why
The
and
whys. Yeah.
how is this gonna, affect me and so on and so forth. But I think each of those contrasts and similarities, kind of overlap with all the generations. So again, not to silo anyone.
Yeah, exactly. It can just be potential differences. And I think if we can leverage the strengths of all of our individuals, because diversity of thought is so important. And whether that diversity of thought comes because you're in a different generation or because you come from a different country, a different culture, there's a business case for it. It's not just about having a great culture, which we do have, but companies that seek out the thoughts, opinions, and ideas of
Yeah,
from a range of people, they grow more, they get better ideas, more people want to
exactly.
work for them. Like, it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, fantastic. Um, so when you were talking before about, I think it was perhaps more millennials, but thinking about where they work and what their role is, and really, how the organization aligns with their values and so on. I think that's fascinating because, again, something we talk about in the leadership development program, but we need to make sure that our people, no matter what their generation, but they know what their North Star is. So where do I fit in? What impact am I having? And where are my strengths? And if you don't know the answers to all of those questions, which you may not, how can you seek out those answers? And I think one great way of doing it is to look for feedback, from your leaders, from your peers.
Exactly. It's being curious, and that means being curious about feedback, asking questions, like being, and then having an open mindset with that too, being open to all kinds of feedback, like how you're perceiving that sort of feedback, if it's positive or room for improvement, that's still a positive. And it's like, again, you know how you don't know what you don't know until you know. So
Yeah.
how are you going to know? You have to ask. So it comes down to like personal sort of accountability to, push yourself to get that sort of information for your own sake and to better understand yourself and what your strengths are and needs. And then the more that you do that, like getting feedback and networking, and like the more that your strengths and potential are going to be kind of brought to light and embraced because more people around you are seeing it and involved with that growth as well.
Yeah, very well said. And I really like that you don't know what you don't know, you don't know.
You don't know
Quote
what you don't know until you know.
until you know. Okay, there we go. I got it in the end. Um, and it makes me think of another favorite quote, which came from the International Women's Day panel over a year ago, which was, it's not about what you know or who you know, it's who knows what you know.
Yeah.
And when you talk about networking, I think that's a big part of that too. I mean, you and I, because we love doing it and we need to do it, we're always looking to connect with people who have expertise and or a passion around developing others, certain topics, certain activities. And that's what we love doing, bringing those people together.
Yeah.
Um, some other things I think that we could direct people to from a resources perspective would be the mindset modules on coaching culture, um, the concept or the idea of starting to journal.
Hmm.
Is that something that you do, Anna?
I I kind of impromptuly
Yeah.
journal, I guess, like when I have aha moments of like self-reflection or oh my gosh, this is a great idea or
Yeah.
whatever, like I will just immediately write them in my notes in my phone or put them in my notes on my computer, like email myself things
Yeah,
because it's like I need to
I
remind
do that.
myself about this because I my brain is like too active sometimes, so I need to like harness all of that. And I think journaling and whatever, method of journaling that you do or any sort of method of self-reflection in that way is definitely important because it just like each of those moments of like okay idea or this makes sense or this is clicking, like it's just like one more step into a goal that I'm trying to reach or like like it's all falling into place. So, and I think like being able to mentally track that for your own
Yeah.
sake again is only going to help you like have that a clearer kind of understanding and direction of where you're going and what you want.
Yes. I'm pleased you said that because the term journaling for me, I don't know if it's because I'm from the UK, but it makes me think it conjures up like, that story Little Women, later made it a movie many times over, where, you've got kind of a young woman who's diarising her day. This happened,
Hmm.
this is how I'm feeling about it. And if people do that, that's great, no criticism of it. But it doesn't have to be, to your point, it could take all sorts of different forms. And I love how you say like an aha moment or, self-reflection moment. that doesn't have, it might be daily, it might be weekly, it might just be ad hoc, like
Right.
you were describing. I do something very similar. I'll just note down if I've had something, a great experience, something's gone really well, or I've had a particular challenge, I'll write that down somewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good point. But we do actually have, resources that can help you get started with journaling if you want some other ideas. We do have a mentorship program. So if you want to get connected with that, please let us know, because I think mentorship is another way of
Yeah.
developing yourself, networking, seeking
Yeah.
advice, getting more data.
Yeah, I mean, I think even just, having individual like one-to-one coachings, whether I'm delivering those or I'm having one with you or, with Lucy on our team,
Yeah.
like it's already doing exactly what like coaching and mentoring is intended to do. And that's helping me recognize, like giving me the autonomy to kind of understand what my needs are, strengths, what have you, and then what, attainable goals are, and like how I'm already like in that direction. Like it, and I haven't, and sometimes that's how it goes. Like people might not even realize that they're in the midst of getting closer and closer to the light or to their goal or whatever. And until like you reflect and then you realize, and then it's just, again, for me at least, very reassuring and helps me kind of feel like I have a clearer kind of trajectory to go off of.
Yeah. It just makes me feel better once I've written something down in a number of
Yeah.
ways. And
Yeah.
you can also, I mean, there's some research to show that if your goals are written down, they're more likely to be achieved, or even if they're spoken
Yeah.
out loud.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm a big, we're both big note takers. I write down like every single thing, but it's kind of like passively manifesting, what you want and what you know that you can do. So whether that's journaling or just having like a vision, like vision boards are
Oh,
really,
yeah.
helpful. I have little post-it notes around that have like hearts and dollar signs on them because I'm just manifesting things that I want. But
Yeah.
not to get too sidetracked on that. Um,
Hearts and
um,
dollar signs. That's great. Yeah. Not just one or the other.
right.
And maybe
The
they go together, maybe they don't. But yeah, I like that
the
imagery.
the term you used, what was it? The stand-in result, like picture yourself in
Yeah.
the exact, well, how
Visualize the
you,
outcome.
yeah, how about you explain that?
So it's come from our promise-based management stuff. And there's a lot more to all the promise-based, but the part that I really love is getting yourself to think through, okay, this is what I want to achieve. Once I get there, and this would be many steps before you get there, it could just be when you've had the idea. What's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? What's it going to sound like, even? Whatever your sort of main stimulus that gets you thinking and feeling about what that result is going to be. And I think they use it quite a lot in sports psychology,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
getting like, a basketball player, for example, to visualize that winning
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah.
So it hasn't worked for me in the tennis world yet, but it has worked for me in other ways in
Yeah.
my personal life and my professional life. Um, because yeah, then you've got that vision. It links to the vision board as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, well, hopefully we've given people some ideas. You've certainly given me some new ideas, and we'd love to hear from other people about, how they deal with change and what are some of the things that they do to remain resilient and confident and curious. There's a
Yeah.
lots of people out there I know that will have things to share, so I hope they do.
Yeah. Agreed. And like, everybody's experiences are different and like everybody is, individually different in how they, work with things, or how they, stay resilient, or what works for them or what doesn't. And so the more that we can, share those best practices and learn from one another, I think it's just all the better. And I think we're truthfully, as an organization, like, have been doing that and continue to, again, embrace that and harness it. I think, like, How to Hustles are the perfect example of how we demonstrate diverse generations, and
Yeah.
diverse knowledge, and allowing people a voice, and showing empathy. And that means allowing everybody a voice, and pulling things, recognizing and pulling things that we can learn from each of the generations. Like, for example, for the Gen Xers, who might be a little independent, like, maybe some of, like, millennials could take a note from that, and learn how to kind of be more independent when when it works for you. And, like, and it doesn't always have to be, one set process. Like, it's, again, to not think in all or nothings, not limit yourself. Like, the way that we adapt to change and processes, best practices, toolkits, resources, there's a plethora of information and things out there to support us with that. And the good thing about that is that, because of so many options, that just means that we're not as pigeonholed, and, like, we have opportunity to, like, explore that and have an exploratory mind.
Yeah. Not thinking in all or nothings. That's another great quote I like. I'm going to have to remember these for the hashtags.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we're hoping to get back onto a more regular cadence of these episodes, and I hope everybody enjoys this one. Look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Anna.
Thank you, Lizzie. Appreciate it.